The whole world can see they're in love with you, but somehow you remain completely blind to these 6 psychological truths. Everyone around you notices. Your closest friends whisper about it behind your back. Complete strangers pick up on the energy when you're together in public spaces. The evidence surrounds you constantly, like an invisible force field that everyone can detect except you. Yet you walk through life utterly unaware that someone holds deep feelings for you. This isn't about being oblivious. This isn't about lacking emotional intelligence. This isn't about being broken inside or damaged by your past. And it's definitely not because you don't deserve to be loved. The reality runs much deeper, penetrating layers of psychology that most people never examine. Certain expressions of affection operate beneath the surface of conscious awareness. They don't announce themselves with fireworks or parade floats. They don't demand acknowledgement through grand gestures. They exist in the background, patiently waiting for recognition, like a quiet melody playing just below the threshold of hearing. Right now, I'll reveal what everyone else already understands, but nobody has bothered to explain to you directly. When genuine affection goes unnoticed by its recipient, 6 specific psychological patterns explain the disconnect. Once these patterns become clear, your entire perspective shifts dramatically. You'll start seeing signs you've been missing for months, maybe even years. So pay close attention, because what I'm about to share could change everything you thought you knew about love. First truth: their affection manifests through subtlety rather than spectacle. Society conditions us from childhood to expect dramatic displays of affection. Constant text messages flooding your phone, grand romantic gestures stolen from movies, public professions that make everyone uncomfortable, relentless pursuit that borders on obsession. We're taught that love should be loud, obvious, impossible to miss. But their approach differs completely from this Hollywood template. They express care through whispered actions that barely register on your radar. They monitor your well-being without broadcasting it to the world or seeking credit. They absorb your words more than dominating conversations with their own stories. They appear during critical moments rather than convenient ones, showing up when you actually need them instead of when it benefits their schedule. Your notifications don't explode at 3 in the morning because they respect your mental space and understand boundaries. They refuse to battle for your focus because authentic affection requires no performance or competition. They won't fight with others for your attention because they're secure enough to let their actions speak louder than any desperate plea for recognition. Since you anticipate loudness because that's what movies, songs, and social media taught you to expect, their gentle presence gets misinterpreted as apathy or disinterest. You confuse their respect for your space with a lack of care. You mistake their patience for indifference. Whispered love carries more weight than shouted promises. This represents affection that endures beyond the spotlight, the kind that remains constant when nobody's watching, and there are no social media posts to prove it existed. Think about it this way: which matters more? Someone who tells everyone they love you, or someone who actually shows up when you're struggling at 2 a.m.? The answer seems obvious, yet we continuously overlook the quiet ones who demonstrate love through consistent presence rather than performative declarations. Second truth: they prioritize your protection over their pursuit. This individual possesses intimate knowledge about your interior world that most people never access. They understand your anxieties in ways even you sometimes don't. They recognize your emotional scars, seeing the wounds you hide behind confident smiles. They know your previous heartbreaks and exactly how those experiences shaped your current approach to relationships. Rather than chasing you recklessly like someone desperate for conquest, they shield you from further pain. They withhold certain words not because they don't feel them, but to avoid applying pressure that might send you running. They occasionally create distance to prevent overwhelming you, understanding that sometimes space is the greatest gift you can offer someone who's been suffocated by past relationships. They select patience instead of control, waiting for you to be ready rather than forcing their timeline onto your healing process. Your internal voice protests loudly. If they really cared, real feelings would fight more aggressively. They'd pursue me harder. They'd make their intentions unmistakably clear. But here's what escapes your awareness. They are battling every single day. They're resisting the impulse to accelerate things prematurely. They're managing their own vulnerability and fear of rejection. They're wrestling with themselves, torn between expressing their feelings and protecting yours. This internal struggle consumes them, yet they bear it silently because your well-being matters more than their confession. Distance sometimes protects what premature closeness would shatter completely. They've learned this truth through observation, perhaps through their own past mistakes, and they refuse to repeat those patterns with you. So they wait, watching from a respectful distance, hoping you'll eventually feel safe enough to see what they've been offering all along. Third truth: your joy matters more than their wants. Most people misunderstand this principle completely, mistaking possessiveness for love and control for care. When affection runs authentic, self-interest takes the passenger seat, while your happiness drives the vehicle. They observe you enjoying time with others without inserting themselves into every moment or demanding inclusion. They champion your aspirations, even when those paths exclude them entirely, celebrating your promotions and opportunities that might take you far away. They want you to travel, grow, explore, and thrive, even if that growth doesn't include them in the picture. Your happiness becomes their priority regardless of personal cost, sacrifice, or loneliness. This isn't martyrdom or unhealthy self-abandonment. This is what happens when someone values your well-being above their own desires, because they never demand territory in your world or stake their claim publicly. You conclude they desire none. You interpret their lack of possessiveness as lack of interest, when actually it demonstrates the opposite. Selfish affection makes demands, while real love offers sacrifice without keeping score or expecting repayment. They'd rather remain voiceless than become your cage, the bars that restrict your freedom and limit your potential. They've seen what happens when love becomes obligation, when affection transforms into ownership, and they refuse to subject you to that suffocation. This rarity often hides in plain sight, mistaken for friendship or simple kindness, when it's actually something far more profound. Consider how revolutionary this approach is. They actively encourage your independence while secretly hoping you'll choose to return to them. That's the gamble of unconditional love. It gives freely without guarantee of return. Fourth truth: you've normalized turbulence instead of stability. Face this honestly without judgment or shame. Your romantic history features intensity, drama, confusion, euphoric peaks alongside crushing valleys. The relationships that taught you about love were probably characterized by uncertainty, anxiety, and emotional whiplash. You learned to associate love with chaos, mistaking intensity for passion and drama for depth. When someone enters your reality with peaceful energy, reliable presence, and emotional security, recognition fails you completely. They feel wrong precisely because they feel right. Your nervous system, trained to anticipate conflict, doesn't know how to process consistency. They don't trigger your anxiety responses that previous partners activated constantly. They don't manufacture emotional hurricanes to keep you off balance and dependent. They don't vanish then reappear cyclically, playing games with your attachment system. They simply exist consistently, showing up predictably, responding thoughtfully, maintaining steady emotional availability. Because serenity feels alien to a system programmed for chaos, you bypass them entirely, scrolling past their name to text someone who keeps you guessing. You're addicted to the adrenaline of uncertainty, mistaking the absence of anxiety for the absence of chemistry. You tell yourself there's no spark when really you're confusing the spark with the burn of dysfunction. But tranquility isn't tedium or boredom. Tranquility represents love's mature form, what remains when the artificial intensity fades and authentic connection takes its place. This person offers you the relationship your trauma keeps rejecting but your soul desperately craves. The question is, will you recognize it before it's gone? Fifth, truth. They demonstrate through behavior rather than vocabulary. This person might rarely verbalize those 3 famous words that everyone expects to hear, but observe carefully. Truly pay attention to their actions. They retain tiny details from conversations you had months ago, bringing up that book you mentioned or asking about that problem you were worried about. They detect shifts in your emotional state before you've even identified the feeling yourself, sensing when something's off without you saying a word. They volunteer assistance unprompted, showing up to help you move or offering to run errands when you're sick. They modify their patterns and adjust their schedules so your existence smoothens, making life easier through countless invisible gestures you barely notice but would desperately miss if they disappeared. They nurture through tangible methods rather than flowery language, proving their care through sustained effort rather than poetic declarations. Because you're monitoring for verbal declarations, waiting to hear "I love you" spoken clearly, you completely miss the dialect of consistent effort that speaks those words through action every single day. Vocabulary can deceive with shocking ease. Empty promises sound beautiful until time proves they meant nothing. Sustained action reveals truth that words can never touch. Anybody can speak those words after 3 drinks or during a passionate moment. Rare souls demonstrate them silently, repeatedly, faithfully, over months and years when nobody's keeping score and there's nothing to gain except your well-being. Watch what people do, not what they say, because actions form a language that cannot lie. They've been writing you love letters through their behavior, but you've been too busy listening for the words to read what they've written. Sixth, truth. You doubt your own lovability. This represents the most challenging revelation, the one that cuts deepest when you finally acknowledge it. Somewhere deep within your psyche, buried beneath layers of defense mechanisms, you question whether someone could genuinely care about you without conditions attached. You believe affection requires earning through perfection, proving through achievement, or deserving through constant self-improvement. When someone offers unconditional regard without demanding flawlessness or requiring you to be someone different, your psyche rejects the possibility entirely. It doesn't compute within your existing framework of how love operates. You search for ulterior motives because unconditional acceptance feels too good to be true, too dangerous to trust. You diminish their emotions, downplaying compliments and dismissing expressions of care. You convince yourself they're merely being polite or friendly, projecting kindness rather than genuine affection. Yet they perceive your imperfections clearly, your messiness, your flaws, your worst qualities, and still select you internally, still choose you despite knowing everything. Until you accept your inherent worthiness, until you believe you're deserving of love simply for existing rather than for what you achieve or provide, you'll continue missing what's offered freely. This person sees value in you that you refuse to acknowledge in yourself, and that disconnect creates the ultimate blindness. The cruelest irony is this: the love you're desperately seeking has been present all along, but your wounded self-worth won't allow you to receive it. They're offering you everything, but your closed hands cannot accept the gift. Final reflection. The entire world recognizes this person's feelings for you with crystal clarity. They notice how this individual observes you when you're not looking, studying your face like they're trying to memorize every detail. They hear how this person discusses you during your absence, speaking about you with unmistakable warmth and protective care. They watch how they maintain connection despite everything, despite your obliviousness, despite receiving nothing in return, despite every rational reason to move on. Everyone understands except the one person who matters most, and that tragedy plays out daily in subtle moments you keep missing. But awareness begins now, right this second, as these patterns illuminate truths you've been avoiding. Affection doesn't always announce itself boldly with trumpets and declarations. Sometimes it lingers quietly in the background, hoping you'll eventually perceive what's been present all along, patient as stone and twice as enduring. If this resonates personally, if one specific face entered your thoughts unbidden during this video, that's no coincidence or random occurrence. Perhaps the moment has arrived to observe differently, to look with new eyes at someone you've been categorizing incorrectly, not through fear's distorting lens that anticipates betrayal, not through expectations' filter that demands perfection, but through understanding's clarity that sees people as they actually are rather than as you fear they might be. Because the gentlest love frequently runs the deepest, flowing like underground rivers that nourish everything without ever demanding credit or recognition. And maybe, just maybe, it's time to acknowledge what everyone else already sees so clearly.